Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about issue number 16 of the Avengers, which is a tie-in to the Blood Hunt event written by Jed McKay. But before we dive into the story, I want to ask you a favor. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and a comment to help the channel grow. Now this issue opens with Captain America standing determined in the cockpit of the helicarrier, his hands gripping the controls with a confident determination. It had been a long time since Steve Rogers had piloted one of these colossal airborne command centers, but the urgency of the situation demanded his expertise. "Hold on," he shouted, his voice cutting through the din of the battle. Beside him, Baron Blood's eyes widened with a mix of fear and frustration. "What are you doing, you maniac?" he roared, his fangs ready for action even as he struggled to maintain his footing on the shaking deck. So with that said, Steve glanced over at Baron Blood, with a smile playing on his lips, and said, "That's okay, it's like riding a bike, a 200,000-ton flying bike," he joked as his confidence remained unshaken despite the chaos around them. Now the ride was rough, the turbulence jolted the Avengers within the helicarrier. Now Hercules, with his immense strength, stood protectively over the civilians as he held on for dear life. "What is he thinking?" shouted a confused Hazmat. "It's Captain America, he knows what he's doing," replied Kate. So with that said, Captain America's smile grew as the sunlight illuminated the deck. "If the vampires have taken the sunlight from us, then we just have to go to the sunlight," declared Cap, as his optimism cut through the gloom like a knife through darkness. So as the helicarrier ascended and broke through the clouds, the sun's rays bathed the ship in a warm, golden light. Now following that turn of events, Captain America hopped on the speakers and announced throughout the helicarrier that they have sunlight. Now with this small victory, the Avengers sprang into action with each member knowing their role in the upcoming battle. "Avengers, you know what to do," commanded Steve as he turned to face Baron Blood. So as the two men squared off, he informed Blood that the autopilot is currently set, so they were free to continue their conversation from earlier. So with that said, Baron Blood's claws extended as he reminded Captain America that sunlight doesn't hurt him, but Captain America remained unfazed as he tightened his grip on his shield as he prepared for battle. Now within the ship, the battle commenced with a fury, as Hercules smashed through the ranks of the vampires with ease, as his roars of defiance echoed through the helicarrier. Hawkeye, ever the precise marksman, knocked an arrow and let it fly. The arrow's sonic waves disrupted the vampires and threw them into disarray. But from my perspective, it looked more like a fire arrow, but oh well. And on the next page, we see Hazmat, her hands glowing with lethal energy as she stepped forward and said, "Look, not that I'm complaining about it, but it feels a little weird frying them when they're running away," Hazmat muttered as she unleashed her powers against the retreating foes. Now Quicksilver's sharp eyes scanned the battlefield, noting the vampires' unusual retreat pattern. "They're all running in the same direction," he observed as his mind raced to understand their tactics. "Wait, where are they going?" asked Hazmat as her brow furrowed with concern. "And are you sure?" "Just as sure as I am about running," replied Quicksilver with his voice laced with irony. So with that said, Quicksilver radioed to Captain America and said he thinks they are up to something. So with that said, Captain America and Baron Blood found themselves locked in brutal warfare. Blood and sweat mingled as they exchanged blows. Their movements was a deadly dance of combat. "Steve," Quicksilver's voice crackled through the comms. "Unless you are too busy." "I'm never too busy for you, Pietro," Captain America replied, while delivering a mean right hook to the vampire leader. So with the okay given, Quicksilver went on to say, "The vampires are retreating because it would appear that they have a plan." So with that said, Steve instructed Pietro to interfere with it then, because according to Steve, Quicksilver is good at that. Now with the marching orders given, Captain America squared back off against the vampire leader as he raised his shield in defiance and told Pietro he is one of the biggest pains in the neck he has ever known. "So please apply those skills," requested Steve with a hint of amusement in his voice. With a sigh, Pietro responded and said very well, and sped off to carry out his task. Now the vampire leader lunged forward with his fangs bared in a vicious snarl. "Oh Captain, I'd rub your nose in this if it was my very last breath," he growled. "Did you really think that I wouldn't have a plan in place if my flagship was lost?" he continued with his voice dripping with venom. "That my vampires wouldn't know what to do?" Now despite the vampire leader's taunts, Captain America remained strong as he asked if Blood was planning to scuttle his own craft. So with that question out there, Baron responded and said, "What is the loss of a flagship compared to killing Captain America and a team of Avengers?" sneered the vampire leader. "And by the way, Captain, none of your Avengers can fly, do they?" "Because I can," the vampire leader revealed as his sinister grin widened. "Now will you abandon all the people you've abducted alongside your very own followers?" Captain America challenged, his voice rising in righteous anger. The vampire leader shrugged off the concern. "Of course I would, because that is no great loss. Because there has never, nor will there ever be, a shortage of credulous fools waiting to step in line," he declared. So with that said, in the midst of the chaos, we discover Quicksilver listening in. "You get all that, Pietro," said Steve through the comms. "I did," Pietro confirmed. "I will leave you to it then, Steve, while I go and interfere." So with that said, Quicksilver immediately started to issue marching orders by telling Hercules and Hazmat to continue to clear the vampires out and to keep them away from the civilians. And as for Hawkeye, he was just about to issue her orders right before she interrupted him and finished his sentence. Because he was just about to ask her to come with him, because out of all the members of this makeshift team, she was the only one to have memorized the entire helicarrier deck plans when she was 12 years old. So with that said, Quicksilver took hold of Kate and told her to hold her breath before taking off toward Deck F where the reactor was held. In the midst of the chaos, Quicksilver and Hawkeye continue their relentless pursuit to disable the helicarrier. And while they were battling through the enemies, Kate shouted, "The fastest way to shut down a helicarrier is an emergency reactor dump, which is behind the massive door before them." So with that said, Hawkeye narrowed her eyes in concentration and fired arrow after arrow at the approaching vampires. "You learned all of this from a science project?" questions Quicksilver with a hint of doubt in his voice. "I'm very thorough," responds Hawkeye as the last vampire erupts in flames. So with the enemy dealt with, Hawkeye states that they need to get through this blast door as she eyes the reactor control panel. So with yet another obstacle before them, Quicksilver asked if her science project included access codes. To which Hawkeye responded by saying that's not how it works. So with that said, Hawkeye jokingly asks Quicksilver to come up with a plan, to which Quicksilver shoots back and says he already does. He was just waiting for her to ask, because waiting is not his forte, except in the case of satisfaction. Now with that said, Hawkeye rolled her eyes and replied sarcastically by saying, "Wow, can't imagine why they didn't call you for the first string Avengers." Now on the last panel, Quicksilver proceeded to hush Hawkeye and focused on the task at hand, and started to type in a string of passwords until the door to the reactor chambers slid open. On the next page, we see Hazmat and Hercules fighting off more vampires as their combined strength and powers overwhelm the enemy. And while they are doing that, we get a narration from Quicksilver, and he starts by introducing himself as Pietro Maximoff, or better known as Quicksilver. And then he continued by saying, "Speeches like waiting are not my forte, so please consider this a threat, for the Avengers have taken your ship and my colleagues are, as we speak, annihilating any of your number they come across. And our Captain America is fighting your barren blood. I assume you don't need me to tell you what that means. We're talking about Captain America, and a fight with him ends in one way." So with that announcement out, the vampire soldiers realized their dire situation and contemplated their next move, for even Captain America can't survive a crash from this altitude. So with a twisted plan in the works, Quicksilver's smirk grew as he jokingly said with pride in his voice, he certainly did back in 1945. "We'll die for the cause of Avenger, and take you with us, for we'll be remembered as honored martyrs that barren blood will recite our names on the list of heroes," boasted the vampire soldier. "In that case, perhaps you should listen to this," responds Quicksilver as he activates his identicard. And just like that, Quicksilver used his card to play back Baron's and Captain America's conversation so the officers could hear it. And just like he expected, the vampires were highly upset once they heard what their leader said. Now with that info out there, Quicksilver and Hawkeye stand firm at the door, as the vampires will then ask if Quicksilver and Hawkeye will let them live if they open the door. To which Quicksilver responds by saying they have his word. So just like that, the three vampires took off running full speed as the door to the room was left open behind them. Now with their objective met, Quicksilver casually asked if Hawkeye could handle this on her own, because he was going to help Captain America. So of course she said yes as Quicksilver went to do his thing. Now on the last panel, we see the vampires talking amongst themselves and said, "Listen, we'll grab some hostages for food from the cells and commandeer a lifeboat," but before they could get far, Quicksilver is already a blur of motion. "What was that?" exclaims a vampire soldier. "You said you'd let us live," a vampire soldier shouts, fear replacing his earlier bravado. "You gave your word," another accuses. Quicksilver stands tall, his expression cold. "You all stopped living the moment you became vampires. And as for breaking my word, well, I suppose I've lived with worse. You see, I am very angry about my sister," he adds, his voice filled with a quiet rage. The vampire's fate is sealed as Quicksilver moves with deadly precision. Now after that bloodbath, we jump over to Hazmat and Hercules as they continue their search for Captain America. "Still have no idea where we're going," exclaims Hazmat. "Well, we've run out of vampires to slay, and I certainly don't feel like sitting still when there's heroism to be done," replies Hercules with a hearty laugh. "I said I agreed, but we're not going to help Captain America if we can't find him," protested Hazmat. So as they climb the stairs, they spot Captain America locked in combat with Baron Blood. And while they were fighting, Captain America pointed out how this tub is still flying. "Merely for the present, Captain," retorts Baron Blood with anger in his voice. So just like that, both Hazmat and Hercules arrived on the scene. And in a sarcastic tone, Hazmat replied to Blood's comment by asking if he is sure about that, because Lil Miss Overachievers got the reactors sorted. And as for Hercules, he added his comments with a giant grin and said they had delivered the gift of battle to his warriors. So with all his plans running up dry, Baron Blood, defiant to the end, snarls and said, "This isn't the end of it, for the skies are still black and his people still overrun theirs." But at this point, none of that matters, for Captain America steps forward, flanked by Hercules and Hazmat, and declared their fight to be over, and then it'll be over for the next Tin Pot Tyrant, and the next one. For they are Avengers, and they don't quit till the job's done. So with the odds out of Baron's favor, he turned to face the window and dived out as he shouted, "It's never over, Captain, you should know that. We've been doing this dance since 1942. So as he leaped into the air, he finished by saying, "You will see him dead yet." So with Baron out of range, Captain America cursed in frustration, and continued to say, "Pietro, I can't believe I'm saying this, but you're late," he mutters as Quicksilver arrives. "Am I?" Quicksilver replies with a smirk. "He got away," Captain America states. "A shame," Quicksilver responds nonchalantly. Now on the last page, we see Hawkeye taking aim with her bow with her focus razor sharp. And while she tracked her prey, she thought to herself, how fortunate it is that she was taught how to be an Avenger by the great Captain America when she was just a young ex-supervillain. Now this legend of World War II also taught her to always have a backup plan. And having taken such lessons to heart, she found herself fortunate that she believed so deeply in passing on what she had learned to the next generation. So with that said, she concluded her inner dialogue and let her arrow fly true. So with that said, this issue comes to an end. Now with that out there, if you want to stay in the loop about any individual storyline, then how about you hop over to the playlist section down below or in the link cards above to get all caught up on the Blood Hunt event. So with that established, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please don't forget to leave a like and a comment if you want to see more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next review.